o'clock on Friday, the 31st of March. So I'm going to get started with our very first lightning talk. Very happy to have you all here today. This is the kickoff of our series of lightning talks for 2023, and it's a great start for us. Griffith University, of course, acknowledges the people who are traditional custodians of the land, and GIER recognises that we're all living and working in Australia on territory that always was, always will be Aboriginal land, unceded lands that have always been places of learning, scholarship and care. And we pay our respects to elders, past and present, and commit ourselves to the ongoing work of reconciliation. It's important for us in all of these sessions to be thinking about the places that we stand, the places that we live, and the places that we work, not only because of our commitment to reconciliation and acknowledging our First Nations and Indigenous colleagues, but to think about the things that we stand for and people that we stand alongside and the work that we are trying to achieve. So today we're going to be talking about a range of issues relating to our research. We're going to have a presentation, first of all, from one of our members, Judy Rose. Then I'm going to talk to you a bit about places to stand in regards to publications and planning research agendas. And then we are joined by a special guest, Valesia Stevens. I'm very sorry. Can you please correct me on the pronunciation of your name?
Sure, it's Vilia.
Vilia Stevens.
Yes.
Thank you, Vilia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Vilia will be talking to us about her role as a publisher with Routledge. So we have a perfect combination of topics today. I shouldn't say that when I wanted them, but it is a good spread of topics. But let's start with the things that brings us together, and that's Judy, who's going to talk to us about some of her research. So Judy will talk for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions. Judy, is that okay by you?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Leonie, and thanks everyone for coming along today. I just wanted to reiterate what a pleasure it is to reconnect with GIER, such a fantastic, friendly and inclusive and welcoming research centre. So I'm very, very excited to be involved. So I'm just going to be doing my very first lightning talk. So I'm just going to get the presentation up and share it with you. Let me just see. I think I have to press share first. So please bear with me. I'll get this up and ready. Can everybody see that? Yeah? Okay, even a thumbs up or a yes? Great, thank you. So this is a little bit, I probably should preface this talk today by saying I have been interested in issues to do with gender for about 20 years or so. I had a reflection on that yesterday and realised this is kind of a new topic for me, but also something that I've had a very long-standing interest in, and it's developed in certain ways that I'll be sharing with you today. So what I'm particularly interested in at the moment is this concept of toxic masculinity, and those of you familiar with gender would have probably come across scholars such as Raewyn Connell, who talked about things like hegemonic masculinity and forms of masculinity that continue to evolve and change over time. So my concern today is what about the boys? And I'm particularly interested in boys who are transitioning from childhood to adolescence, so about that 12, 13-year-old group, and their exposure to what I'm calling today toxic masculinity. So like Leonie, I'd just like to reiterate an acknowledgement of country, and I'd also like to pay acknowledgement to the Quandamooka people on whose lands I stand today. Thank you. So what is this term toxic masculinity? It evolved as a term around about 2015, so fairly recently. Professor Michael Flood from QUT is a scholar who's written a lot about this topic and done a lot of research in the area. So it's also been a term that's been taken up by the media as well, so you may have heard about it there. And basically what it's talking about is a particular model of gender, particularly masculinity, that is very narrow, very rigid, very limiting, valorizes things such as physical and verbal violence, subscribes to ideologies such as male entitlement, particularly white male entitlement, and is a model of gender that the research is showing is very harmful, not only to victims or girls, but to boys themselves. So you can see with this image here, a boy who's probably in that target age group that I'm interested in at the moment, the kind of messages that they're hearing about this type of masculinity are illustrated in some of the quotes there. So what I'm interested in just highlighting for you in this lightning talk today is some of the social influences and influencers, if we take on board that social media type of language, that boys and girls are coming across or being subjected to, I guess you could say, in their social world. So the first one that we can't ignore is the issue of gender inequality, which is something that is still a problem in society. For example, in Australia, we still have quite a large gender pay gap, for example, and there's many other aspects of that. But it's also to do with attitudes to relationships. So here I'm talking about personal relationships, or in the literature, they sometimes call this intimate relationships. So a recent survey that was done by the National Community Attitudes Towards Violence Against Women in 2017 found that 2 in 5 young Australians, so just under 50%, supported this statement. I think it's natural for a man to want to appear in control of his partner in front of his male friends. So some of these fairly, what you might think 2017, a fairly traditional gender view, are still somehow coming through in the younger cohorts that are being surveyed. So obviously a survey is not necessarily representative of the whole population, but gives you a bit of a snapshot. So attitudes to relationships are one aspect of social influence. And another aspect is actually sport. So I was talking to a friend of mine last night who's a teacher with 2 young boys. One of her boys is 12 actually, so right in that age group. And she was talking to me about how she had to take her son out of rugby league because of the behaviour, very violent, and some of the language that was being said on the field that was very misogynistic. I won't use that language here, but it's language that's being used not only by players on the field to each other, but parents as well. So she was quite horrified by that and has taken both of her sons out to other sports that have a sort of a different culture to gender. Interestingly, it's probably just an aside, her partner is from Ghana, and so her son's sort of mixed race, I guess you would say, and yet there was more sexist language on the field than racist language, though some of that did occur as well. So sport is a big area where toxic masculinity might be sort of infiltrating. Also, just the phenomenon of violence against girls and women, and this often then translates into family and domestic violence as well. And in terms of influencers, we're at a period in history where we can just assume that most young Australians, children in their teens, are using a lot of on the internet, spending a lot of their time on the internet, as we would expect, social media. And there are pockets on the internet where some extremist views about gender are being sort of brewed up, I guess would say, or attracting interest from sort of vulnerable boys who might be just looking, searching about their social identity. So some subcultures that have emerged that are quite toxic are from influencers such as Andrew Tate, who's quite an open misogynist rape supporter type person. A group who are called the incels, the involuntary celibates, who tend to be white males, quite young, are very angry about women not wanting to have sex with them. And also groups probably a little less toxic, but certainly fairly rigid ideas about masculinity, the eshays, which is a particularly Australian subculture that's sort of built off the lad culture in the UK and the bro culture from the US. So we just need to think about boys in schools, girls as well, are sort of being subject to these kind of influences and influencers. What I thought was very interesting, just to look at this issue another way, is to focus on this period of transition to adolescence. So this might be boys who are just leaving primary school in Australia, entering high school for the first time, or perhaps they're in a P to 12 school and they've entered middle school, for example. So I'm going to show you in a moment a bit of a clip from a Belgian film that came out, directed by Lucas Dumont. It has won a few awards at Cannes Festival and was nominated for the Academy Award. But what I thought it was good at showing is, in a sort of different way, what happens to boys as they go through this transition. So it starts off with a couple of boys, you can see them embracing there, who are best friends in primary school, to the point that they're always together, they love each other, they talk about their love for each other. They are truly close, best friends, they share everything together. But during the film, we see, and I'll show you the trailer very soon, how over this transition, they are taught from comments that students say and just culture itself, society itself, to shut down their emotions, not talk about love anymore. The friendships, therefore, the close friendship becomes less close. There are greater pressures and expectations that these boys are more rough, tough and violent. This becomes valorized. And even a simple thing like riding their bikes together suddenly becomes very competitive. So all of these pressures, kind of like coming from this idea of masculinity, a very rigid idea of masculinity, start to infiltrate. So I'll just play the trailer for you. It's a film I haven't seen yet, but I do want to once it comes to streaming services. And I'll just play that for you.
I think we've lost the sound, Judy. Would you mind
Okay.
sharing, unsharing and then resharing, please?
Yep, I'll do that. Sorry, I thought that might happen again. Okay, yes, looks like that button needs to be turned on again. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, I'll just share again. There we go. Okay, I'll play that again. Can you hear that?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Ils sont derrière, cours!
Voilà quoi.
Je vais dormir chez Rémi ce soir. Tu reviens chez nous un jour? Peut-être. Ouvrez les fenêtres, les garçons. T'es prêt?
Hallo iedereen, welkom in het eerste middelbaar.
Est-ce que je peux poser une question? Est-ce que vous êtes ensemble? Non, on n'est pas en couple. Je pense qu'ils sont meilleurs amis plus. Oui, on est plus, mais genre même quasiment frères, c'est pas... peut-être que vous assumez pas.
Alors, t'es dans la même classe que Rémi?
Goed zo mensen, goed zo, dat is goed, heel goed, goed bezig. Ah, nog eens.
Pourquoi t'es venu?
Vas-y, on accélère. Non, tu m'attends toujours, mais là tu me laisses. Tu vas chez Rémi ce soir?
Non.
Pourquoi?
Harry, Rémi,
Il est pas là.
Go! That's it! Go!
Calme-toi. Arrête.
Okay, let's see if I can get out of there and move on from that slide. Oops. Okay, phew. All right, everybody with me? Yeah, thank you, everyone. So I think it's interesting because I listened also to a YouTube video from the director who reflected on his own adolescence and friendships in primary, I don't know if it's called primary school in Belgium, but in elementary school, and how he lost some very close friendships during that time that were never sort of re-established because of these pressures of masculinity. And I think it's kind of sad in a way. So this is just an indication that toxic masculinity also is not necessarily good for boys. They lose a lot of intimacy with friends, the language of sort of intimacy and sort of love and, rejecting emotions. So it's not good. It creates harm for boys and girls. So this, particularly that very toxic form of masculinity. So I just wanted to more or less finish the content on this slide. What can schools do to address toxic masculinity? And I should preface here that obviously schools have been doing a lot with anti-bullying programs, wellbeing programs. I know Sue Watman and Catherine Main I'm not sure if they're here today, but have done a lot of research and fantastic research in this area. What I did find interesting and is fairly new in Queensland is a program that's called Respectful Relationships Education that actually began in Victoria in about 2009. I think once again, Michael Flood had something to do with this. And it's a program that Queensland has recently sort of updated in 2017. And what I found particularly interesting was it was in response to recommendations from a landmark report called Not Now, Not Ever, done by Dame Quentin Bryce into domestic and family violence. So that sort of connection there between family and domestic violence and these issues of violence and consent and sexual assault and things like that are sort of all covered, I believe, in this program. So this was just sort of a news update, sort of talking about that. Perhaps once we get to the end of the presentation, if there's just one more slide, I might open that up to other ones that maybe people in the audience today might have also come across, or perhaps you've seen this program as well. This is just a snapshot of some of my current and hopefully future research. You never really know what the future holds. You're often looking into a crystal ball, particularly when it comes to research funding. But some really good news. Last week, I just got an abstract accepted for a special issue of Health Sociology Review. And the special issue is looking at global healthcare systems and violence against women and girls. And we're drawing on a paper that we presented at the Stop Domestic Violence Conference 2 years ago, where we presented a play on looking at coercive control and how healthcare systems were not able to really, number one, identify or be able to help the victim with that. We're also writing, I'm writing with a colleague, a coercive control flip paper. Must mention Chris Bigham is our mentor there. He was our mentor on the first paper, so thank you, Chris. And the target journal for that is Journal of Family Violence. So we're calling it a flip because we're taking the point of view of the male perpetrator, which will be interesting to see how the reviewers like that or not. Some personal research projects related to masculinity and male change programs are out there, aren't they, Leonie? With GIER and Disruptive Violence Beacon collaboration, so we don't know yet how they're going to go. And I'm very interested in looking a little bit more deeply, or listening, I guess, to what schools have to say about domestic and family violence. So very much I would need to collaborate with people on that, but that might just be a future wish list, because I do feel it's an area where schools are a little bit out of their depth and don't necessarily, know how to handle it or have great awareness of issues related to that. So I'd just like to finish off with watch this space, and thank you for listening today, and be happy to take any questions if Leonie, if there is time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Judy. I'm going to ask anyone who's got a camera to turn their camera on so that we can actually visibly clap for Judy.
Oh, thank you.
So
I'll
that
just
you can get a
turn my-
sense that you're not just in the room by yourself. There we go.
Here you all are. Thank
There
you.
you look. It's
Hi
nice to
there.
actually know that the
Hi,
people,
Sue.
you are surrounded by a community of people. So thank you very much for those who are able to do that. You can turn your cameras off now if you wish. Anyone who has written a question or a comment already, you can press return now, and then Judy will be able to look at those in her while she's not also trying to speak.
Yeah,
But we have time for a question or a comment. I might just mention, Judy, that my very first job as an academic, a full-time academic level B, was to teach a specific course on gender as a social justice issue back in 1998, I think.
That's fantastic.
And
Yeah.
since then, it's all gone. We don't teach that anymore. We have to sneak it into various ways. So it's the issues remain, and the support for it has decreased. Question. Somebody have a question?
Yeah,
Comment?
that's interesting. Thanks, Leonie, for that insight. I agree with you 100%.
I won't dominate. Somebody will have a question.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, that movie does look good. Of course, the sort of reviewers hyping of it, I'm not sure some of the reviewers get at the sort of deeper message of, it's not just about a friendship breaking up. It's got some deeper sociological issues. So it might even be, Leonie, in a course like you're talking about, a good little video to show or something like that to talk about. Because one of the things I really didn't want to do was, and Michael Flood talks about this as well, I don't want boys to be thinking that masculinity is a negative thing, that it's more about this idea of a toxic, rigid masculinity that is harmful. So that can sometimes be hard to explain and understand for young people. Yeah,
Absolutely. And that's why, obviously this is a big area for me. I've been doing this my whole career. That's why it's so exciting to have somebody else doing it as well. There's many people in this group who are doing it, like Danielle and Skinner, like everybody, various ways, Sonal, Sue. Sorry, I probably just list everybody's name here. Just read out the things. But one thing I have found is that people assume that you don't actually need expert knowledge to do this work, that you can just jump into a course that's halfway through a science lesson, and you can just add in a couple of minutes discussion about gender stereotypes in science, and that's enough, then your job's done, as though there is no actual expertise required to think about gender in the way that you're talking about it. It's hard work. You actually have to put hard work into it, and the students, we need to equip them with those skills as well, so that they can react to it in a sensible and sustainable way.
Yeah. And thanks for that comment too, Sue. I know you've been doing some brilliant work in this area. Yes, it's been in HPE forever. Yes.
Yeah, and that's another example from Sue, about how teachers just skip it because, and then we've got to ask questions. Do we actually, oh, sorry, Sue, you're there. I'll let you talk.
You go, Sue.
Oh, yeah. You just brought back memories of this one lecture where normally I have excellent attendance for HPE classes. And then the week we were specifically looking at where does respectful relationships education sit in the curriculum, and then diving into sex education. 4 people were there, and I was just going, you all hate teaching this, and then you all don't turn up when we're actually going to talk about how do you teach this. So it's like this never-ending cycle of, we don't do it well enough. Yeah, and you shy away from the opportunities to learn more. So that's why I was thinking that the sorts of things that you're drawing our attention to, and different ways that teachers can engage with how do I address toxic masculinity within the broader framework of respectful relations, and then even where that sits in the curriculum is teachers will appreciate it, because they might be sent dragging and kicking to do it, but at least they know that once they've done a little bit, they'll go, oh, okay, it's not so hard to have these difficult conversations after all. Or there's these great resources like these movies, or there's these great teacher kits that unpack scenarios that are like they talked about that blurred minds one. Where were we when they talked about that the other day? That was in the Emerging Scholars Day, wasn't it? Was that where it was?
I think I don't know. Might have been.
Yeah. So they started off with like alcohol situations, but now they've moved into, okay, no, we're actually going to start talking about consent, because they obviously go hand in hand with parties and alcohol. So, you know, and it's simulations. So there's lots of different ways that teachers can start their conversations.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
no, absolutely true, Sue.
Thanks
And
so
I do
much.
Thanks, Judy.
yeah, I remember this. Yeah,
Sorry, Judy.
no, I was just going to say, Sue and Catherine did that amazing study, wellbeing program in schools around sport with those boys. I have some memory of that, and I think that could also kind of be expanded to, you know, maybe bring on some of these ideas. But yeah.
Okay, I'm going to pause there. We're going to say thank you to Judy again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure
for being generous to launch our lightning talks.